Hello, my name is Joy Baskin, and I'm the Director of Legal Services for the Texas Association of School Boards. During today's training, we will be joined by two school law attorneys who are nationally recognized as legal experts in the area of student and employee harassment and bullying. First, we're joined by Tom Hutton. Tom is a staff attorney with the National School Boards Association in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Tom.
Very pleased to be joining you.
Tom has written a number of articles and given speeches all over the country on these topics. Next, we're joined by Lisa Brown. Lisa is a partner with the law firm of Bracewell and Giuliani in Houston, Texas. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Joy.
Lisa is the current chair of the Texas Council of School Attorneys. She, too, has written and lectured extensively on this topic. We're very pleased to have the experts with us for our training today. For the next few minutes, we will be discussing the subject of sexual harassment between employees. Tom, what exactly is employee-to-employee sexual harassment?
The easiest case that we all think about when we hear that expression is to think about unwanted sexual advances by employees to other employees or requests for sexual favors of one kind or another. It's important to remember that sexual harassment reaches a variety of other kinds of behavior in the workplace. It can be just sort of an environment in which gender somehow is an issue, the employee's gender is being made an issue of, the employee is being treated differently based on gender. It doesn't even have to be sexual per se. It could be, demeaning comments about women and that kind of thing where it's not a sexual sort of advance, but it's just the person's gender is at issue. The bottom line really is that it reaches the level that it affects the person's work performance or sets up sort of a hostile environment for the employee.
Lisa, the court cases on sexual harassment talk about quid pro quo harassment. What is that?
Quid pro quo harassment is a type of harassment perpetrated by someone that has some supervisory authority over the subordinate employee. And in this type of harassment, the supervisor conditions job benefits on the subordinate's participation or acceptance of unwanted sexual advances. And it is a key aspect is that the supervisor has considerable authority over the terms and conditions of the subordinate's employment. And that could be hiring and firing authority, significant authority over promotional opportunities, but it again is distinguished from other types by the fact that the perpetrator is a supervisor.
The following scene shows an example of this kind of sexual harassment.
Ever since coming to work at this school, the athletic director has always called me names like darling, sweetheart, and honey. After a while, he started commenting on my appearance, too. I remember one day I went to his office to discuss scheduling extra practice hours for the team, and he kept telling me that I looked hot in my outfit. I tried to keep the discussion about practice hours, but he just kept telling me how pretty I looked and asking me why I worked so hard. He said something like, "A pretty young thing like you needs to find a man and have babies." His comments about my appearance kept on, and they got worse. He stopped me one day at my car when I was leaving to discuss the performance of the varsity volleyball coach. He says that she's having problems. Then he said that if I was willing to show him just how much I wanted the job, then he'd give me the head coaching job. I just hate going to work every day knowing that I'm going to have to deal with him.
Lisa, what did you notice about this scenario?
In this situation, the alleged perpetrator is the athletic director. He is the person with supervisory authority over the coach. And what he's saying to her is, and suggesting, it's more than a suggestion, he's making it clear to her that if she submits to his advances, then a promotion might be in order. So there you have the quid pro quo, a Latin phrase basically meaning you do something for me, I do something for you.
In the scene we watched a moment ago, we saw an example of quid pro quo harassment, where the athletic director offered the coach benefits and threatened her with consequences to try to get her to agree to a relationship. But not all sexual harassment involves bribes or threats by a supervisor. Sometimes employees commit sexual harassment by creating what's called a hostile environment. What is a hostile environment, Tom?
A hostile environment is a little bit different from the supervisor sort of trying to make an advance on the employee. This is the other kind of category that I was talking about, where just generally the environment is such that an employee is being treated differently to their disadvantage based somehow on their gender. It could be a lot of off-color comments are being made in the workplace. It could be the physical environment. There's pornography in the environment or something. It could be the kind of banter that employees sometimes have with another reaches kind of a level of persistence and pervasiveness that it starts to sort of affect the person's workplace performance and creates an environment where they just don't feel as comfortable in their role as an employee.
Lisa, do women ever sexually harass men?
The answer to that is yes, that the statutes that prohibit harassment, they're not designed to protect only women or only men. And if harassment occurs because of your sex, then it's going to be a violation of the laws that prohibit that type of behavior. And I recently looked at statistics from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, and they reported that annually about 14% of all the complaints filed with that agency are filed by men. So although we see the numbers tending to be higher on the side of women filing complaints, without question, men do file complaints, and that type of harassment is a violation of the law.
Can a person sexually harass a member of the same sex?
Yes, absolutely. That any time you have harassment directed at someone because of their sex, then it theoretically could violate the law. And if you have a male harassing someone who is male, and it's because of that person's gender, then that's going to be a violation of the statute, same as if a female were to harass another female. So it's not a statute that is limited to heterosexual type of harassment claims. What the Supreme Court has said, however, is that harassment claims have to constitute more than just horseplay. So the key thing is it because of that person's gender that these things are happening to that person?
Sometimes, when I'm talking with school employees about sexual harassment, someone asks me if flirting is sexual harassment. What do you think, Lisa?
In general, no. The key ingredient in a harassment case is that the behavior is unwelcome, unwanted. If it's wanted and welcome, and flirting often fits that category, then it's not going to violate the law. So again, we look at, is it welcome conduct?
Tom, in the scene we watched earlier, what should the coach do as the victim of harassment?
This is a very clear case where the school district really wants to encourage an employee to come forward and report this to the appropriate person. And that should be made clear to the employees who the right go-to person is. You want to make sure that if it's the supervisor, as in this case, that's doing the harassing, there's got to be an alternate way for the employee to bring this concern to the attention of the district. So every school district policy typically will designate 2 or 3 alternative routes, but this needs to be brought to somebody's attention so that it can be dealt with clearly. One thing that's important to remember, though, in this is that it's not necessarily the answer is, well, why doesn't this employee just tell this harasser to bug off? And that the onus then somehow is on the employee to take care of the problem themselves. In an ideal world, we'd love for that to happen. But remember, with all victims of harassment, adults or children, sometimes that's difficult, and the system needs to be set in place so that that's not how it has to work.
What can a school district do to encourage employees to report sexual harassment?
Well, the first thing that a district needs to do is have very clear and effective policies and procedures in place. They need to make sure that those policies and procedures aren't just gathering dust on a shelf, that all the employees understand what those policies are and know them. Ideally, there should be training so that everybody understands what the policies are and what you're supposed to do in a situation like that. In addition, everybody needs to understand that the district will, to the extent possible, try to maintain everybody's confidentiality. That's really crucial to be encouraging people to be willing to come forward. The reality is you can't guarantee that 100% in every time, and people need to understand that as well. But to the degree possible, if you can keep things confidential in this process, that's going to help people feel more willing to bring things to the attention of the district. Another thing that people need to understand is that there will be absolutely no retaliation tolerated, and this goes for not only for the victim being sort of retaliated against by the perpetrator, but also if it's a case where there are conflicted feelings in the school community about what's happening and that word gets out, that there's no retaliation and sort of resentment being directed at somebody who's brought this to the attention of the district.
Lisa, what should an employee do if he or she knows or suspects that sexual harassment is happening?
Well, I begin by wanting to know, is the employee a supervisor or not? If someone is a supervisor and they have knowledge of sexual harassment, then they have obligations under their employer's policies to bring that to the attention of management or human resources and make sure that the policy is going to be enforced. If it's an employee in that supervisor's department or campus, then there are going to be specific obligations that that supervisor may have to take corrective action or to make sure an investigation happens. A different scenario is presented when it's simply co-workers, perhaps at the same level. And in that situation, I think it comes down to some common sense practical advice. Hopefully, someone can be a resource for a colleague, give them advice about the policies. If they have information, lead them to the handbooks, tell them what they know about the policies. In a situation where the harassment is disturbing to the employee, even though they're not the recipient, there are times where that also obviously is a major concern, where you're seeing something happen, in which case you would want that employee to report it in accordance with policy, even though they are not actually being subjected to the harassment.
Looking back at the scene we saw earlier, Tom, what consequences could that athletic director face?
This is a situation where the AD could face all kinds of discipline. It could be reprimand, it could be suspension, it could be even up to outright dismissal, depending on the severity of the situation. The other thing that sometimes happens in these kinds of situations is that the alleged harasser will be transferred to another setting so that at least the alleged perpetrator and victim aren't running into each other all the time. Whatever steps the district takes, the point is they have to be reasonably calculated to end the harassment so that, you know, it may be less severe at some point and more severe at a later point. The bottom line, though, is that it's calculated to make sure that the harassment is no longer happening and won't recur. The other thing for a harasser to keep in mind is that a victim can sue somebody for harassment themselves. Whether or not the district is taking the action that the victim wants taken, the victim may be able to incur liability on the perpetrator as well. There's another point to this vignette that's important. We have the advantage in sitting here and watching this footage of seeing what actually happened. The reality in the real world is you're getting a situation where something's been reported and the school district is trying to ascertain which side of the story is more credible and that kind of thing. So here's just something to keep in mind. For a harasser who's engaging in this kind of behavior, one way or the other, there is going to be an investigation. And out of that investigation is going to come some report. And even if that report is inconclusive or decides on balance that they don't think that the person committed the infraction, that report is now in the hands of the district. And at some point, if another incident happens down the road, now it starts to look like a pattern and maybe there's something there. So even when it is a he said, she said situation, harassers beware.
Lisa, can an individual employee, like a supervisor, ever be held responsible for the harassment that was committed by another employee?
In some circumstances, the answer to that is going to be yes. And the first question I would want to know is whether or not the other person is a supervisor. If you are a supervisor or manager and you have that knowledge that someone who is under your supervision perhaps, that they are being harassing and abusive toward someone else, you have that knowledge and you're deliberately indifferent and you don't take corrective action, then there are causes of action on the federal side that do exist. And there may be other theories that are out there that complainants pursue, but the deliberate indifference claim is the one that seems to be most common.
Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure, Joy.
Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
This concludes the section on harassment by employees. I hope you find the scenarios, expert commentary, and written materials helpful to you as you learn to recognize and deal with harassment. If you have any questions regarding the topics covered in this DVD, please talk to a district administrator. Thank you.